Hi, it's Novice here. Now I know in the past few days we've been having fun with hacking and whatnot, but today we're gonna switch gears, going from offensive to defensive. So in the last video I showed you guys how you can crack passwords using Hashcat and a few other tools. Today I'm going to teach you how you can possibly defend yourself from those type of attacks or get better at detecting when those attacks are actually happening. And with that, I'm just gonna turn it over to our virtual workstation and we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to go over is preventing an offline attack. Now, to prevent an offline attack, the unfortunate truth is there's nothing that can be done if the hash has already been extracted and an offline attack happens online or offline. But there are things that you can do to prevent it from getting to the stage where a hash is actually extracted. And those include protecting the NTDS.dit file. Now, the best way, in my opinion, to do this is to create a read-only domain controller. Now, this doesn't take away much of the capabilities of the domain controller. What it does do is that it limits certain domain controllers from actually having write access. Now, this pretty much makes it so that the NTDS.dit file does not contain every single password hash for every single user. It only has the password hash for those who are allowed to use that specific domain controller, therefore lessening the chance that anything bad can happen. Now, you can also restrict access to your domain admin account, because as you saw last time, I could only get the hash as a domain administrator so that I could then use that hash to crack the password. Now, to prevent online attacks, this is where we can get into some things. So here, the most important thing for preventing an online attack is actually creating a strong password. So let me open up wherever it is, group policy. So group policy management, I got here group policy management. I just have these pre-open so I can open and go through them quickly. So the best way to do so would be to create and define GPOs where you are increasing the complexity of your password, therefore making it so that it includes certain characters, numbers, uppercase and lowercase letters, things of that nature, and then to also increase the length of your password. So as you guys can see here, right now my password complexity isn't the best. It has a length of 7 characters, and then it also has a lockout of 0 invalid login attempts. So a lockout is pretty much what happens when you attempt too many passwords at once. And since I have it at 0 invalid login attempts, it's not as if I can get none wrong and it gets locked out. The problem is that I can continuously guess passwords without getting locked out. So we're actually going to change this right now. My hope is that this doesn't affect my current users, but we'll see, and if it does, we will change it back. I believe we go to Windows settings, probably security settings, and let me see. I believe we're going to go to account policies, password policy. So here I can actually change the length. Now, it is suggested that you change the length to you change the length to 14 characters or more, because anything less than that can be cracked within the span of a few weeks, especially if the complexity doesn't exist. When I speak of complexity, I mean the different characters that can be used in your password. For instance, if you can only use the alphabet in your password, even 14 characters can be cracked pretty quickly. If you can only use letters and numbers, the complexity is increased because of the inclusion of numbers, but you want to also add special characters so that when you have 14 of those characters, I believe it's going to take around 30,000 years, I believe, to crack that, which is why we suggest doing so. So in this case, we're going to increase this to 14, apply, press OK. Now let me see. Let's set it so that it actually minimize it so it can meet complexity requirements. We'll press OK there. And that's all we'll do here for right now. In future videos, I'll most likely change this back so that we can actually continue to try to crack. We'll do some different attacks, but right now I'm just showing you how to go through and actually defend yourself. Now we're gonna not close out. We're gonna come down to the account lockout policy. Now here we're just simply going to change this to make it so that it'll lock out after 5 invalid attempts. So if I get the password wrong 5 times, I'm now locked out of the account. Let's go ahead and apply that because of the volume. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. And I was honestly gonna come and change the lockout duration as well. We are actually going to increase that. If you're locked out, I'm not just giving you a 10-minute timeout. We're gonna give you, I wanna say an hour. So, let's do 2. So 120-minute timeout. Then we're gonna apply, and okay. This reduces the time between an attacker, especially if they're brute forcing you. So say for instance, they have now hit the limit of 5. They're now timed out for 2 hours before they can then continue the attack. So this pretty much thwarts them, and unless the attacker is very, what's that word? Very convicted, they're most likely just gonna stop and give up. Now that we talked about how you can actually prevent an offline and an online attack, I now want to switch gears and talk about how you can actually monitor your monitor any password cracking attempts. So first, we're going to actually flip the script and do how you can detect an online password crack. So I'm going to minimize this, and now we're going to open the Windows Event Viewer. Now you can get there by going to Event Viewer. I already have it opened up so I can show you guys what I got to show you. Now, in case of a password cracking attack, password cracking attempts, there are a few different event IDs that you should look for. But before I get into that, the Windows Event Viewer is pretty much a container that holds all of the logs of every single thing that happens on your Windows device. Now, there are certain events that don't get logged unless you enable a policy to do so, but if you enable it, you should be able to see it here. Now, this is very important, especially for security purposes, because say for instance, someone has successfully logged in. Well, there is an event ID for that actually shows us this case. In our case, this would be 4624. So even if we scroll down, let me see if I can find who this is. It just shows the computer, but that's fine. But yes, in this case, you can see that a successful login has happened. But what if you actually want to see if you failed to log into the computer successfully? If we scroll up a little bit, well, I don't know how little it is. You would get the event ID of 4625. Now, if you guys are watching my videos, you should have actually seen this is when I tried to log in with the user onto the domain controller, but I believe that since I wasn't a domain administrator, it did not allow me to. Yes, it's alice.j. Failure information, and the user has not been granted the request to log on type at this machine. Makes sense, right? Now, something else you want to keep in mind will be this 4688. Now, this one kind of delves more into the detection of an offline password attack, because what the 4688 event log ID means is that a new process was created. And if you can see that a new process was created, if you can go through and detect what type of process is actually created, you can determine if different credential dumping tools are in use on your computer. Say for instance, I get an event ID of 4688. Looking deeper into that alert or this event, I'll actually see that it says that the mimikatz.exe was started due to a different process. if I see that, I now know Mimikatz is running, and it would be my goal as a defender to stop that from happening, or to see where Mimikatz is actually attacking and try to defend it. So, in case of a post incident or post alert, you would be looking for this to actually validate how they did what they did. And so this becomes very important for detecting an offline crack attack, because using Mimikatz is usually a very big indicator that someone is trying to grab your credentials. Not only that, you can also, I believe another process is the lsas.exe and then procdump.exe. There's a lot of different tools that can dump credentials, but just keep an eye out on this 4688 event ID, as it detects when a new process is created. Now, going back to detecting the online password attacks, if we scroll up just a little bit here, we see this 4776. Now, this 4776 ID actually speaks about an NTLM authentication attempt. Now, NTLM is the hash that Microsoft uses to store your password. Now, this hash is usually used after you're logged in and sent to different services that might need your account information to determine your authorization or permissions to certain different events. And when that happens, all that information is stored here using the 4776 event ID. Now, there are two more that I want to hit on. Unfortunately, they are not in this event ID, or not in the event viewer, because we haven't actually got to them yet. But those two are 4771 and 4740. Now, 4771, that's Kerberos pre-authentication failed event ID. Why this is important, as I described previously, with Kerberos, the first step is to send an authentication server request to the key distribution center. What this event ID tells you is that you have sent the wrong information. If that is the wrong information, it's pretty much the same as saying you have put in the wrong password. And because of that, you cannot get access in here. Now, this could also be an indicator of an online password cracking attempt, because this would be detected as just a wrong password. And if there are multiple wrong passwords for a single user, you can have a good idea that they might be doing a brute forcing attack. And then moving forward to the 4740, this is the event ID for an account lockout. So this tells you when an account gets locked out. Now, accounts only get locked out because they have had multiple failed password attempts performed on them. So that's usually a big indicator that, oh, something is wrong, or a legitimate user just got their password wrong a lot of times, which happens quite a bit. But using these alerts, you can also just key in on some specific indicators of compromise. For instance, if there's a whole bunch of login failures, in this case we just learned that that's the ID 4625 from one singular source to a lot of different accounts, you can think that they're using a password spraying attack, because they're using the same password on multiple different users and just trying to get something. Now, like I said prior, if you see that type of alert, the 4625 on one singular account from multiple different passwords or multiple different attempts and getting failures, you can think that they're doing either a brute forcing attack or a dictionary attack. Then also, if you see a huge spike in the amount of account lockouts, you can assume that they are now attempting to brute force multiple people, and they're failing constantly. And then finally, if you see any successful or even failed login attempts at weird hours, or from, who knows, like Canada, and nobody in your environment is in Canada, you can usually tell that this could be an indicator of compromise. Now, I spoke about detecting offline password attacks a little bit earlier. as it relates to 4688. But to rehash, the main reason that 4688 is important for detecting an offline password attack is to detect the tools that are used to actually grab the hashes. And now I'm just going to go over a few other things to look for when detecting an offline password attack. Now, to get better at detecting an offline password attack, there's also another GPO we can enable so that we can set specific files and folders to actually be audited to see if someone was able to successfully grab that information or to successfully connect to it or failed to, or even if there was just an attempt. So let me actually open that up. Oh, wrong one. And it is this one right here. So to get here, go to computer configuration, followed by policy, Windows settings, security settings, come down to advanced audit policy configuration, audit policies, then object access, and then audit the file system. And here you would obviously want to configure the following audit events and select both success and failure. You apply that and then you press OK. Now once that is done, you would have to go into your file. In this case, we'll do it on my AD environment. Let's go back to downloads. You would then go to properties, security, advanced, and then auditing. And then here you decide on who this audit should happen. So say for instance, I put it on every single person. Anybody who tries to touch anything within that folder or within any files within the folder or the folder itself, I will be alerted. Now, I want you guys to think a little bit. What could this be helpful to detect in this specific instance? And the first thing that came to mind was what I was saying earlier, the NTDS.dit file. Because it stores all of the user password hashes, it becomes a big target for any attacker. And since that's the case, if you have a way to constantly detect if it is even being touched, you will now know and have an idea of who's doing it, where it's coming from, or if it's getting touched by a process that might have been scripted so that they can actually grab that information. So I just briefly went through that because I'm not actually going to enable this. As I said, I'm going to need these for some future attacks. So let me actually get to disabling some of these. So let me come back in here. Apply and OK. And then finally, with detecting offline password attacks, there are a few things I'll just go over verbally instead of showing. And that's just because it's easier that way. So another way to detect an offline password attack is to detect the copying of large files from a domain controller. Like I said, the domain controller holds a lot of information and has a lot of power in the domain as its controller. If you see a lot of files being moved from there or a lot of data being moved, it's usually not a good sign. So keep that in the back of your head. And then finally, as you guys noticed in my previous video for my password attack, I used VSS admin to actually create a shadow copy so I could grab the information in the NTDS.dit file. Now, pretty much you just want to check for unauthorized use of any tools that could help me to do so. In this case, VSS admin. So this would pretty much be the same way as I kind of just discussed. Whenever you see a new process created and you see something like VSS admin .executable or whatever the executable name is, I can't remember it right now, you have an idea that an offline password attack could be in the works, right? Could be in the works at that moment. But that was honestly everything from me, guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. This was meant to be short and brief, show you a few different ways that you could actually defend yourself from a password cracking attack so that you don't just sit there being the victim. You can detect it, you can make ways to prevent it, so that you come out on top over the attackers who are trying to steal your information. And with that, I'm just gonna bring this video to a close. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did like the video, make sure you hit that like button. And if you support what I'm doing, just go ahead and subscribe so that you can get a notification when I'm doing new things. And finally, if you didn't like the video for some unknown reason, just let me know in the comments, because I am constantly trying to improve, and feedback from you guys would be great. And finally, that's everything from me. Catch you guys in the next one. Novice out.